Salutes. It's Asafo Chumo Asafo reporting to y'all from the belly of the beast. I just wanted to smuggle this message out. This is Anatomy of a Snitch, a warning to the streets. Now we know it is no secret that a snitch is uniformly one of the most abhorred and hated people among any circle, whether it be in the business world, an exclusive club, a political party, a religious organization, or a street fraternity, or a so-called gang, or in the everyday social setting. In recent years, snitching has reached epidemic proportions and has gone virtually unchecked, leaving the black community in ruins. So this evening, we wanted to attempt to just shed some light on this phenomenon and its constituent elements. Webster's dictionary describes a snitch thusly: an informant, to turn informer, to squeal on someone, to tell. A snitch is known by many other relative titles: stool pigeon, fink, rat, turncoat, traitor, among others. However, no matter the title, the ultimate end is betrayal. And according to an old street maxim, betrayal is the bastard son of cowardism. The most common known quisling is the so-called law-abiding citizen, who routinely cooperates with the established authority out of a conditioned, albeit misplaced, sense of duty, and genuinely feel in his heart that he's doing the right thing. The law-abiding citizen views anyone not in compliance with the laws set up and enforced by the established authority as a criminal. Of course, his definition of criminal, much like his views in general, are manufactured and readily provided to him by the established authority, which, in this instance, is the American government and its many law enforcement agencies. The so-called law-abiding citizen in this context is a modern helot mentally, and functions in most cases as an unwitting servant of the oppressive American system. And because of his induced state of historical amnesia, he has forgotten that the government and its repressive laws, which he so obediently adhered to, are founded on the kidnap, rape, murder, and enslavement of African peoples, not to mention the mass slaughter of the natives, or so-called Indians, and the illegal seizure of their land, thereby rendering the American government the archetype or original criminal, which in turn gave birth to the so-called law-abiding citizen. So those who comply with or abide by the very laws fashioned and perpetuated by the original criminal literally becomes agents of the original criminals, thus proxy criminals themselves. Think this over. And since whites in general are the primary beneficiaries of said laws, they are serving their overall interests when they cooperate with the established authority. Conversely, when blacks and other non-whites cooperate with the repressive government in the vein of being a law-abiding citizen, especially at the peril or detriment of their own endemic ethnic or racial group, respectively, makes them traitors. Such treachery determined the fate of one of the black liberation movement's most beloved and promising leaders, Comrade Fred Hampton, who was brutally gunned down by the FBI and Chicago police after being provided blueprint schematics of his safe house and other vital information by a snitch, a traitor, named William O'Neal, who felt he was doing the right thing, to which National Black Legati Association Chairman Comrade Asafo once quipped, "The best remedy for a traitor is a bullet," end quote. In fact, several black liberation warriors were either assassinated or imprisoned with the collaborative efforts of snitches. In some cases, they were strategically infiltrated into black liberation formations. For instance, the Black Panther Party, the Black Guerrilla Family / Liberation Army, the Nation of Islam, the 5% Nation of Gods and Earths, among others. Some were moles who sat and grew within these formations and reported their plans and activities to the established authorities. Others were agents provocateurs, whose sole purpose was to initiate and agitate dissension and to cause disorder in the ranks, also to provoke trouble, to in effect expose said organizations to being criminalized, to justify the government's aggressions against them. This is how it was going down. Those who know, they know. This brings us to what we would call the opportunist snitch. The opportunist snitch is one who is completely devoid of loyalty. He is prone to betray anything or anyone to aggrandize himself. Such a snitch is neither here nor there in terms of commitment. He acts inherently as a double agent, a chameleon, who blends in with his environment or respective group for personal favor, much like the proverbial yard slave in the days of chattel slavery. On slave plantations, the slaves and the enslaved were recognized in three distinct categories: the field slave, the house slave, and the seldom talked about yard slave. There was a clear-cut distinction between the field slaves and the house slaves, but the yard slave was a bit more difficult to figure out because of his many levels of craftiness and feigned loyalty. For instance, in his bid to gain favor with the slave master, he would often snitch on field slaves' plans to escape, planned rebellions, etc. Likewise, the yard slave would provide the field slaves with information concerning the slave master's activities. Of course, the yard slave was very surreptitious in his handling of both parties. He would often receive frivolous trinkets for snitching, a piece of fried chicken and maybe a buttered biscuit. The yard slave was dubbed such because he functioned both characteristically and literally between the house and the field. However, today he is aptly known as the opportunist snitch. Sure, the titles have changed, but the motives and characteristics are still the same. The opportunist snitch of today is one who would run to the police to settle his business in the streets, rather than handle it himself, even the so-called street-level gangster. If observed closely, the so-called street-level gangster who displays a conspicuous love and reverence for his material possession, the cars, clothes, jewels, etc., above his loyalty and commitment to his friends, family, and comrades, is likely to betray his friends, family, and comrades in favor of said material possessions, even snitch if necessary. And since most people in this hyper-capitalist class society openly worships materialism, they often make the fatal mistake of deeming someone cool or thorough, not by their characters, their principles, or merits of loyalty, but by the clothes they wear, the cars they drive, and a bunch of other facades. The opportunist is utterly self-centered. He is motivated by wanton narcissism. He doesn't regard any group or social interest above his own. He will betray anyone to those who can best serve his personal interests. Historically speaking, it was the opportunist snitch who squealed on warrior ancestor Gabriel Prosser, a bold black freedom fighter who was planning a massive slave revolt on plantations throughout the entire state of Virginia back in the early 1800s, but was halted before it could be fully carried out. The slave master was tipped off, and Gabriel was charged with sedition, given a mock trial, convicted, and immediately hanged. His only crime was his desire to strike a mighty blow at the wretched slave system, and for this, he was betrayed by the opportunist snitch. Nonetheless, some 30 years later, he gained redemption, incarnated in warrior ancestor Nat Turner, who led a relatively successful revolt in Southampton, Virginia. It should be noted Nat Turner was very meticulous in weeding out and avoiding snitches, undoubtedly a lesson learned from his courageous predecessor. A more popular scenario is the story of Judas Iscariot, who was one of Jesus' most trusted disciples, who ratted on the so-called Jesus to the centurion or the Roman police for 30 pieces of silver, an ancient paragon of the opportunist snitch. In this day and time, and in this dog-eat-dog society, or America, the opportunist snitch is given more and more opportunity to snitch, with lesser and lesser repercussions or punishment. It is often iterated that we are living in the information age, where informants are in high demand, and where information can either make you or break you, depending on who has it and how it is used. The proliferation of snitching is a direct reflection of this information boom and the demand for it, especially since information, for the most part, is controlled by the government and its many agencies for its benefit. Hence, the government breeds informants, whether with financial incentives, deception, torture, or as a form of negotiation, especially in getting out of so-called illegal situations where there are multiple so-called perpetrators in an alleged crime. In these situations, lies are always used to bolster the state's justifications to criminalize, prosecute, and ultimately do away with its intended target. The lack of punishments being handed down to snitches is even reflected in the government's protection of them, as even that has grown ostensibly lax. There used to be a strict policy of confidentiality provided for snitches who cooperated with the government, hence confidential informant, and the witness protection program. However, in recent years, these protections have become noticeably obsolete, with the lack of repercussions being meted out to snitches. An example of this can be gleaned from the pages of recent mafia history, with infamous snitch Sammy the Bull Gravano being a salient figure for snitching on famous mob boss John Gotti. Sammy was accused of 13 admitted murders in exchange for his testimony, and he eventually returned to the streets unprotected. He was even arrested again for running a multi-million-dollar drug ring. He apparently has no fear of reprisal, and the fact that he is still alive despite said lack of protection is a testament to the times in which we live. In fact, he has even opened the floodgates for a throng of other wise guy types who opt to cooperate with the government as a way of simply doing business. In this context, the once sacred code of omerta, or code of silence, is a relic and only exists as mere folklore in the books of mafia history. Another example can be discerned from the brief history of Philadelphia's Junior Black Mafia, or JBM, and its infamous snitch, Rodney Frog Carson, who ratted on his crew. And just like Sammy the Bull, he remains in the hood unprotected. The fact that he is still alive is blasphemy to the code of the streets and its professed adherents. In a more broader scope, snitching has become an accepted social reality, an open secret. Mainstream corporate-owned media, that is print, radio, broadcast, television, internet, etc., openly solicits and encourages snitching, especially as it pertains to the powerless and the oppressed, for them to place an honorable mask on an otherwise shameful face of dishonor. Moreover, to associate with a known snitch is to share a tacit complicity of sorts, because to fail to cogently condemn it in whatever way the situation calls for is a form of acceptance. At the very least, the known snitch should be exposed to others who may not be aware of him. In the mid-1800s, at the height of the famous Underground Railroad escape led by warrior ancestor Harriet Tubman and others, there arose many opportunist snitches who attempted to seize upon the opportunity to gain favor with the slave master by divulging the identities of the Underground Railroad leaders and their escape groups. However, such snitches were swiftly punished, or in most cases put to death. Such measures were not out of malice, but rather as a necessity to protect all parties involved and to maintain an absolute secrecy on the railroad to freedom, for failure to do so would have inevitably resulted in the death of all involved. Again, a snitch is a detriment to any respectable group or formation. It should be shunned, condemned, and, in most cases, returned to the essence